Think about the last time you tried to save money but ended up spending it on something you didn't really need. It feels like a constant battle between who you are now and a person you haven't even met yet. Most of us treat our future selves like total strangers, making it nearly impossible to sacrifice today's comfort for tomorrow's security. But what if the secret to building wealth isn't about willpower or complex spreadsheets at all? Imagine if you could flip a switch in your brain that makes saving feel as rewarding as buying a gift for your best friend. I discovered a psychological bridge that changed my entire relationship with money, and it starts with a single, unexpected shift in perspective. This shift didn't happen overnight, and for years, I lived in a cycle of paycheck-to-paycheck anxiety. I would set ambitious goals every January, only to watch my bank account drain by mid-February. It felt like a glitch in my personality that I just couldn't fix. I used to look at my savings account as a graveyard of good intentions rather than a foundation for my life. Every time I tried to put money aside, it felt like I was losing something tangible in the present. The immediate gratification of a new gadget or a fancy dinner always won the internal debate. Scientists have actually studied this phenomenon and found that our brains are wired for immediate survival. When we think about our future selves, the prefrontal cortex doesn't light up the way it does for our current selves. To our neural pathways, that person 10 years from now is practically a ghost. This neurological disconnect means that saving money often feels like giving your hard-earned cash to a complete stranger on the street. You wouldn't hand over half your paycheck to someone you've never met, right? That is exactly why your brain resists the idea of long-term financial planning so fiercely. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a pile of bills and wondering why I couldn't just be more disciplined. I had the spreadsheets and the apps, but the emotional connection to my future was missing. I was living for a now that was constantly consuming my later. Everything changed when I stumbled upon a study about fMRI scans and temporal discounting. Researchers observed that people who could vividly imagine their future lives were significantly more likely to save. They weren't just better at math, they were better at empathy. The problem wasn't my lack of willpower, but a lack of imagination and connection. I realized I was treating my future self like a burden or an annoying obligation I had to fulfill. This realization was the first brick in building what I now call the empathy bridge. Before I could change my habits, I had to understand the deep-seated biology that was working against me. I needed to stop fighting my instincts and start working with them to create a new narrative. This was the moment I stopped trying to save money and started trying to save a friend. I started looking at my bank account not as a collection of numbers, but as a survival kit for a version of me that didn't exist yet. It sounds strange, but science shows our brains actually process our future selves in the same region used for complete strangers. When you think about yourself in 10 years, your brain reacts as if you're thinking about a random person on the street. This biological disconnect explains why it's so easy to click buy now on a pair of items we don't need. The present version of us gets the instant dopamine hit, while the future version pays the price. We aren't being reckless, we are simply failing to recognize that the person who will be 65 is actually us. I spent years stuck in this loop, wondering why my goals never seemed to stick. Every time I tried to set a budget, it felt like I was punishing myself for no reason. I was essentially stealing from a person I didn't know to give to a person I was currently obsessed with. Behavioral economists call this hyperbolic discounting, where we overvalue immediate rewards over long-term gains. It's a survival mechanism from a time when tomorrow wasn't guaranteed and resources had to be used today. In the modern world of credit cards and digital marketing, this ancient instinct has become a financial trap. To break this cycle, I knew I had to make my future self feel real and tangible. I needed to see his face, hear his concerns, and understand his dreams as if they were my own. I stopped viewing my savings account as a locked box and started seeing it as a conversation. This was the origin of the strategy that finally worked after a decade of failure. It wasn't about deprivation, it was about radical empathy for the person I was becoming. Once I bridged that gap, the resistance to saving began to melt away into something much more powerful. The catalyst arrived on a rainy Tuesday when I decided to stop guessing and start visualizing. I downloaded an age progression app, curious to see what 30 years of life would actually look like on my face. When the screen finally loaded, I wasn't looking at a stranger anymore. I was looking at a person who truly needed me. Seeing those deep wrinkles and the gray hair made the abstract concept of retirement feel painfully real. This wasn't just a data point in a financial calculator or a distant, blurry dream. This was an older version of myself who would eventually have tired joints and a desire for peace that I was currently sabotaging. Suddenly, the $5 I was about to spend on a third coffee felt like I was snatching it right out of his hand. I realized that every impulsive purchase was a tiny, quiet betrayal of this older man. The conflict shifted from me versus my bank account to me versus the well-being of a person I now cared about. I decided to give this person a name and a concrete identity in my daily life to make him feel more present. Whenever I opened my banking app, I stopped looking at the balance as my money to spend right now. I started seeing it as a trust fund I was managing for a friend I had finally decided to protect. This mental shift created a strange new friction I had never experienced before when shopping. Before clicking checkout on a random item, I would pause and ask if this purchase would make his life better or worse. Most of the time, the answer was a stinging realization that I was being incredibly selfish with our shared resources. However, breaking a decade of consumerism isn't as simple as changing a name on a smartphone screen. My old habits fought back with a vengeance, whispering that one small treat wouldn't actually hurt anyone in the long run. I often found myself standing in the middle of a store, paralyzed by the tug-of-war between my current cravings and his future security. I leaned back into the science of vividness to help bridge the gap between today and 30 years from now. I wrote a letter from my future self back to my current self, detailing the immense gratitude he felt for my daily sacrifices. It sounded cheesy at first, but the emotional weight of those words made the struggle feel worth it. That letter changed the internal narrative from one of painful deprivation to one of profound contribution. I wasn't losing out on life today. I was actively investing in a legacy for the person I was becoming. The bridge was finally built, but the real challenge of crossing it was only just beginning. The bridge was built, but the first real test came sooner than I expected. A week later, a limited edition tech drop hit my inbox, triggering that old, familiar rush of adrenaline. My fingers hovered over the buy button, and the ancient part of my brain screamed for that instant hit of dopamine. In that split second, the empathy bridge felt fragile, almost like a ghost of an idea. I could feel the tension between the immediate joy of a new toy and the quiet, distant needs of my future self. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was a battle for the soul of my financial identity. I realized that simply imagining my future self wasn't enough to stop a lifetime of impulsive habits. The theory was beautiful, but the reality of a consumer-driven world was designed to tear that bridge down. I needed a way to make the connection so strong that no marketing tactic could break it. This was the moment I stopped being a passive observer of my own psychology. I decided to take a radical step that would make it impossible to ignore the person I was becoming. I didn't just want to think about my future self, I needed to live with him every single day. To bring this vision to life, I printed the aged photo of my future self and taped it directly onto my primary credit card. Every time I reached into my wallet, I was forced to look into those tired, digital eyes before making a purchase. It was a jarring, physical confrontation that turned every simple transaction into a heavy moral dilemma. My social circle became the first major obstacle in this experiment of radical empathy. During a celebratory dinner, the pressure to order expensive cocktails and appetizers felt like an incoming tide. My friends saw a fun night out, but I saw a direct withdrawal from the peace of mind I was trying to build for my older self. When I explained why I was sticking to water and a simple entree, the table went quiet for an uncomfortable moment. One friend joked that I was turning into a miserly hermit long before my time. Their laughter stung because it highlighted how much our modern friendships are anchored in the habit of shared overspending. That night, I lay awake wondering if I was taking this empathy bridge concept to a dangerous extreme. I worried that I was sacrificing my youth for a man who might not even live to see the fruits of my labor. The fear of missing out began to gnaw at my resolve, making my bridge feel more like a lonely, isolated island. I soon realized that while I was fighting the big battles at dinner, I was losing the war through small, invisible leaks. My automated subscriptions were quietly draining my accounts like a slow-moving virus I had forgotten to treat. I had focused so much on the big purchases that I ignored the tiny, recurring costs eroding my foundation from underneath. I tried to automate my empathy by setting up location-based alerts on my phone that would trigger whenever I entered a shopping mall. The plan was to receive a text from old me asking if the item in my hand was truly worth our shared future. However, the technology was clunky and often triggered at the wrong times, turning a helpful nudge into a source of constant frustration. This phase taught me that logic is a remarkably weak weapon against a decade of ingrained consumer habits. Even with the photo on my card and the digital alerts, my hand would sometimes move toward the card reader on complete autopilot. It felt as if my body possessed a separate brain that only cared about the immediate dopamine hit of a new possession. The deepest struggle was realizing that I didn't yet know how to be a person who doesn't spend to feel significant. My entire identity had been wrapped up in being the guy with the latest gadgets and the best lifestyle recommendations. Stripping that away felt like losing a limb, and the void it left behind was both terrifying and incredibly quiet. I tried to fill that void with raw discipline, but my social circle quickly became the next major hurdle. When friends invited me to expensive weekend getaways, the old me would have swiped the card without a second thought. Declining those invitations felt like I was socially isolating myself just to protect a person who didn't even exist in their eyes. My peers didn't understand the sudden shift and often joked about my newfound obsession with the future. They saw a friend who was becoming increasingly boring, while I saw a protector trying to prevent a distant catastrophe. This social friction made me realize that the empathy bridge wasn't just an internal dialogue, but a battle against the collective expectations of everyone around me. I attempted to compromise by creating a small fund, hoping to satisfy both versions of myself at the same time. However, the boundaries were dangerously blurry, and I soon found myself making excuses to dip into my long-term savings for one-time exceptions. Each time I cheated on the plan, the vivid image of my future self began to fade, replaced by the crushing weight of immediate guilt. This cycle of small victories followed by frustrating retreats revealed a glaring flaw in my initial strategy. I was relying far too much on emotional willpower to maintain a bridge that was being battered by the constant storms of daily life. I discovered that empathy alone wasn't a strong enough shield. I needed a structural way to make the right choice the only choice before I completely lost my way. I realized that my willpower was a finite resource that drained every time I resisted a craving. If I wanted the empathy bridge to hold, I had to stop treating it like a mental exercise and start treating it like an engineering project. I needed to build a system where my current impulses couldn't even reach the steering wheel. Behavioral scientists call this decision fatigue, which is the exhaustion that comes from making constant choices against our immediate desires. Every time I looked at my future self's photo, I was using up a little bit of my mental energy. By the end of a long workday, that energy was gone, leaving my future self vulnerable to my weakest moments. I began to dig deeper into why I felt such a desperate need to spend in the first place. It wasn't just about the products, it was about the stories I was telling myself about status and belonging. I was using my future security to buy a temporary sense of importance that vanished the moment I walked out of the store. This led to a brutal internal confrontation between who I was and who I wanted to become. I had to admit that my current identity was built on a foundation of sand and consumer debt. If I didn't change the structure of my life, the empathy bridge would remain nothing more than a beautiful, useless dream. I started experimenting with the concept of positive friction to protect my future self from my own hands. I deleted every saved credit card from my browser and removed all shopping apps from my phone. I wanted to make it so difficult to spend money that my lazy brain would give up before I could complete a purchase. I also had to analyze the toxic social scripts that were making me feel like a failure for saving. I realized that most people around me were also performing a version of success they couldn't actually afford. We were all trapped in a cycle of mutual destruction, sacrificing our futures to impress people who were just as insecure as we were. The real breakthrough came when I decided to automate the empathy itself by paying my future self first. I set up a system where a significant portion of my paycheck vanished into a locked account before I even saw the balance. This took the choice out of my hands entirely, making my future self's needs a non-negotiable expense rather than a leftover hope. Even with the system in place, the emotional work had to continue to prevent resentment from building up. I started visualizing not just the wrinkles on my future face, but the freedom and relief in my future heart. I wasn't just moving numbers around a spreadsheet, I was buying back the time and peace of the person I was destined to be. This newfound clarity forced me to confront the uncomfortable truth about my own ego. I realized that my desire for new things was often just a mask for a deeper need for status and validation. By prioritizing my future self, I was essentially telling my present ego that its immediate whims were no longer the priority. Neurologically, our brains are wired to treat our future selves like total strangers, making long-term planning feel like a chore for someone else. Breaking this biological barrier required more than just a locked bank account, it required a constant, conscious effort to humanize that stranger. I had to stop seeing my savings as a loss of freedom today and start seeing them as the ultimate freedom for tomorrow. Every advertisement and social media post is a carefully crafted weapon designed to blow up the bridge I was trying to build. The world wants us to be impulsive because a person who cares deeply about their future is a person who is harder to manipulate. I began to see my frugality not as a restriction, but as a radical act of rebellion against a culture that profits from our lack of foresight. There were still nights when the silence of my simpler lifestyle felt heavy and the temptation to revert to my old ways was overwhelming. I had to ask myself if I was truly okay with being boring now so that I could be truly free later. This wasn't just a financial strategy anymore, it was a profound test of character that forced me to decide who I really wanted to be. For several months, the system seemed bulletproof, and I felt like I had finally outsmarted my own biology. My savings grew at a pace I never thought possible, and the friction I created made my old impulses feel like a distant memory. I truly believed the battle was won and that I could finally coast on this new, disciplined autopilot. However, the initial rush of transformation eventually evaporated, leaving me in a sterile landscape of constant, grinding restriction. The empathy bridge, which once felt like a heroic path to freedom, began to feel like a self-imposed cage. I realized that while I was fiercely protecting my future self, I was starting to deeply resent the person I was forced to be in the present. The breaking point arrived during a week of minor setbacks that drained my emotional reserves to zero. Seeing a small dip in my progress felt like a total collapse, as if one mistake had invalidated months of perfect discipline. The guilt became so heavy that I couldn't even look at the photo on my card anymore, feeling like a failure in the eyes of a man who didn't even exist yet. I convinced myself that the entire experiment was a flawed pursuit and that humans simply aren't designed for this level of self-denial. I began to quietly dismantle the systems I had built, telling myself that a life of immediate pleasure was better than a life of constant internal conflict. The bridge was falling apart, and for the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of relief in letting it go. I returned to my old habits with a vengeance, trying to reclaim the identity I had worked so hard to shed. I went out with friends and spent without looking at the balance, waiting for the old spark of excitement to return. But the joy I expected was nowhere to be found, replaced instead by a cold, hollow realization that I no longer belonged in my own past. Every new purchase felt like a hollow victory, a temporary distraction that lost its shine before I even got it home. I discovered that I couldn't simply go back to being the person who didn't care about tomorrow. I was caught in a miserable middle ground, unable to maintain the bridge but no longer satisfied with living on the shore of the present. I sat in my apartment surrounded by the ghosts of my old consumerist life, feeling more lost than when I started this journey. It seemed the empathy bridge was just a beautiful, fragile theory that couldn't survive the messy, unpredictable reality of being human. I was ready to delete the files, cancel the automated transfers, and accept that I was destined to be a stranger to my own future. Right as I was about to close the book on this chapter, I caught a glimpse of the aged photo lying face down on my desk. I realized I had been so obsessed with the face of my future self that I had completely ignored the background of the image. There was a detail hidden in the shadows of that digital projection that changed the entire meaning of why I was building this bridge in the first place. Peering closer, I realized the background wasn't the sterile, lonely room I had always imagined. Instead, there were soft, blurred shapes of people gathered around a sunlit table. My future self wasn't just surviving, he was the host of a life rich with connection and warmth. This simple realization changed the stakes of every dollar I saved. I wasn't just hoarding money for a solitary old man. I was funding the laughter of loved ones and the comfort of a home that welcomed others. The sense of deprivation that had haunted me for months suddenly felt hollow. I saw that my present-day sacrifices were actually the down payments on a future where I could give without hesitation. This wasn't about losing today, but about building the capacity to love tomorrow. It felt as though I had finally solved the puzzle and reached the end of my internal war. I believed this new understanding was the final piece I needed for perfect balance. I was convinced the bridge was finally complete and that nothing could ever shake my resolve again. But as I stood on that finished bridge, I realized the strategy wasn't just about the money or the math. It was about a radical shift in how I viewed the very fabric of time. I stopped seeing my life as a series of disconnected days and started seeing it as a single, continuous, flowing river. This was the moment the empathy bridge transformed from a simple psychological trick into a profound life philosophy. I finally understood that saving wasn't a subtraction from my current joy, but a massive addition to my total existence. Every dollar I moved across that bridge was a tangible message of love sent through time to the person I was becoming. By humanizing my future self, I had effectively cured the biological blindness that keeps so many of us trapped in a cycle of debt. I no longer saw a stranger in the mirror of tomorrow, I saw a partner who was actively counting on me today. This alignment of interests eliminated the internal friction that had made my previous attempts at discipline feel like a constant war. The strategy became wonderfully simple. Before every purchase, I would have a brief, 10-second conversation with the man at that sunlit table. I would ask him if this temporary thrill was truly worth more than the peace and security he was currently enjoying. His answer was almost always a gentle, knowing smile that made the right choice feel completely effortless. My identity finally shifted from a consumer seeking external status to a builder creating a lasting legacy. I realized that the boring life I once feared was actually a life of profound intentionality and quiet, sustainable power. I was no longer a slave to the marketing machines or the social pressures that had once dictated my sense of self-worth. The heavy anxiety that had lived in my chest for years simply began to evaporate as my savings grew. I felt a deep sense of pride every time I chose my future security over a fleeting, impulsive craving. It was the same satisfaction you feel when you do a massive favor for a best friend, knowing they will be moved by your kindness. All the systems, the automated transfers, and the deleted apps were merely the scaffolding for this deep internal change. The real work was the empathy itself, the bridge built of genuine understanding and long-term foresight. I had finally synchronized my present desires with my future needs, creating a harmony that felt like a superpower. I looked at the aged photo one last time, and for the first time, the man in the picture seemed to look back with profound gratitude. The bridge was no longer a fragile theory or a daily struggle, it had become my new reality. I had successfully turned the most difficult financial habit into the most rewarding emotional experience of my entire life. The bridge wasn't just a path between 2 points in time, it was a living connection that changed how I experienced every single moment. I stopped seeing my bank account as a collection of numbers and started seeing it as a reservoir of potential energy for the people I loved. This shift in perspective turned every act of saving into a quiet celebration of the life I was actively creating. Psychologists often talk about self-continuity, the degree to which we feel connected to our future selves, but I had found something even deeper. By humanizing my future, I had effectively cured my present-day impulsivity without the need for constant, exhausting willpower. The friction I once feared had become a protective embrace, ensuring that my best intentions were always the easiest ones to follow. The ultimate secret I discovered is that true wealth isn't about what you can buy, but about who you become in the process of waiting. The empathy bridge didn't just save my finances, it saved my character by teaching me that patience is the highest form of self-respect. I realized that by caring for the man in the photo, I had accidentally learned how to truly care for the man in the mirror. Now, when I look at the world, I no longer see a series of temptations designed to drain my future for a fleeting high. I see a landscape of choices where I am finally the architect of my own destiny, building a legacy of security and warmth. The bridge is solid, the path is clear, and for the first time in my life, I am walking toward a future that feels like home. Today, that bridge isn't something I have to think about building anymore because it has become the foundation of my daily life. The small, intentional choices that once felt like sacrifices have evolved into a source of quiet confidence that permeates everything I do. I no longer feel the frantic need to keep up with others, because I am too busy honoring the commitment I made to myself. This shift in perspective didn't just fix my bank account, it fundamentally recalibrated my relationship with time itself. I've discovered that the freedom I was chasing wasn't found in the things I could buy, but in the peace of mind that comes from knowing I am protected. My future self is no longer a distant concept, but a trusted partner who rewards my present-day kindness with a life free from financial fear. You don't need a complex spreadsheet or a massive inheritance to start building your own bridge today. All it takes is the willingness to look ahead and treat that future version of yourself with the same compassion you would offer a dear friend. When you stop viewing saving as a loss, you unlock a level of discipline that feels less like a chore and more like a gift. But as I mastered this financial harmony, I began to wonder if this same empathy could be applied to other areas of my life that felt stuck. I started to realize that the way we manage our money is often a mirror of how we manage our most precious resource of all. This led me to explore a new strategy for reclaiming my time, which changed my productivity forever.